Well, Senator, thank you so much for joining the Texas Bullpen podcast. It's an honor to have you on and joining us from Washington, D.C., I believe.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, why don't you start us off by telling you, I heard you were at the Treasury Department earlier today talking
Yep.
about a pretty big legislative priority of yours, the Trump account. So
Yep.
what was that like? What did you talk about?
Oh, look, we had a great victory today, did a big event with President Trump launching the Trump accounts. And the Trump accounts is a provision that was in the working families tax cut that we passed last summer. Obviously, a massive bill, the biggest tax cut in history. And I think the two most significant provisions in that entire bill, the two most long-lasting provisions, are the Trump accounts and the school choice provision, both of which I was blessed to author. I wrote both of them. On the Trump accounts, every child in America, starting on the 4th of July this year, is going to have a personal investment account opened for them. Newborn children will have it seeded with $1,000, and parents and family and employers can contribute up to $5,000 a year in a tax-advantaged account. All of that money will be invested in the stock market, in the S&P 500. And there are two huge advantages to these accounts. Number one, every kid in America is going to experience the benefits of compound growth. Look, you and I understand that, but half of Americans don't own a single stock or a single bond. And kids are going to have the ability to accumulate real assets, investments, and savings starting from birth. Number two, and this is what I'm even more excited about, we're going to be creating a whole new generation of capitalists. Look, we've all seen the numbers that are frustrating and sad about how many young people are losing faith in capitalism and are thinking, gosh, maybe socialism is a good idea. And we're now, our children are going to be owners of the biggest employers in America, and they're going to have skin in the game. And that is a really exciting long-term investment in changing the way the next generation thinks about the economy, thinks about jobs, thinks about our country.
And so you also mentioned that a part of your legislative package kind of targeting early childhood development was also a federal school choice provision
Yeah.
in the Big Beautiful Bill as well. So how does that kind of pair with the Trump accounts and then maybe even the Texas state school choice program to accomplish what you're hoping to accomplish?
Well, both of them, I believe, are transformational policies. And I'll say last April, all of the Senate Republicans, we did a retreat, and we were talking about the One Big Beautiful Bill and the different elements in it. And I stood up and addressed my colleagues. I said, look, there are lots of elements of this bill that really matter, that we all care about. Securing the border, massively important. Rebuilding the military, critical. Cutting taxes, massively important. But I said, we ought to stop and think for a minute about legacy, about what people will remember from this bill in 10, 20, 30 years. And at the time I said, I have two suggestions for that category, school choice and the Trump accounts. Both of them made it into the bill. On school choice, the provision that we passed is every taxpayer in America can give up to $1,700 per year to a scholarship granting organization in the states. And you will get a dollar for dollar tax credit for making that contribution, not a deduction, a credit. So if you write a check for $1,700 to a scholarship granting organization, you owe $1,700 less to Uncle Sam. So it's basically free money to you. The impact of this, we are going to see tens of billions of dollars in new scholarships. Look, when it comes to school choice, I think school choice is the civil rights issue of the 21st century. I have been leading the fight and active in the fight for school choice for 30 years. And this provision, 10, 20, 30 years from now, we're going to see that millions of kids who were trapped in failing schools were able to get scholarships and able to get an excellent education. And it dovetails beautifully with the state of Texas's largest state school choice program in the country. And I was very active fighting for the Texas school choice program. You know, most senators stay out of issues in the state legislature. We got a lot of fights to fight in Washington. We usually don't get in the middle of fights in Austin. I have followed a very different strategy. So virtually every U.S. senator stays out of primaries in his own state. And there's a reason for that, because politically it's stupid to get in the middle of primaries. That when you make an endorsement, the old rule of thumb is you get half their friends and all their enemies. And so you're losing support when you get in the middle of primaries. I make an exception to that, and I regularly and routinely endorse in state legislative races. And every cycle for the past 6 years, what I've done, I've had my team make a spreadsheet of every vote that's cast in the state legislature on school choice. School choice is my litmus test. And my standard rule is, if you voted in favor of school choice and you're otherwise relatively conservative, you're quite likely to get my support. If you voted against choice, not only is there a 0% chance of getting my support, but if there's anything resembling a credible primary challenger to you, I will support the challenger. And when I do so, I don't do so gently. I go all in. I go up on TV. I go up on radio. I give money. And over the last 3 cycles, what has happened, there have been a number of Republicans who voted against school choice, and we've retired them from the legislature, said, thank you very much. You've decided not to fight for the kids of Texas, and your services are no longer needed in Austin. And so, you know, in April of last year, when school choice was on the floor in the House, and the House is where it had died 2 years ago, I came to Austin, was out on the floor, was personally whipping the state House members and encouraging them, look, the teachers' unions are spending a ton of money attacking you. I'm going to have your back. I'm going to support you. I'm going to be there with you, but also making clear, and if you don't do the right thing, I told particularly the freshmen, this will be the most consequential vote you'll ever cast. And Texas came through and is leading the nation now in school choice. That perfectly intersects with the federal school choice program. And by the way, Dan Patrick's also announced that the state of Texas is going to make contributions of an additional $1,000 to the Trump account. So once again, I think Texas and the new transformational policies that we're passing with President Trump are perfectly interwoven.
Shifting topics, but another issue that has a pretty significant intersection between state actions and, of course, the federal government is the ongoing debate over the H-1B visa program. Yeah. And so yesterday, Governor Abbott issued a directive to state agencies and public universities freezing new sponsorships of the visa program. And it's certainly become a thing. Now, back in 2016, you called that a broken program in need of repair. Yeah. And Abbott certainly talked about how, you know, the states kind of have their hands tied because it's a federal program. What, if anything, are you working on in that realm? And what do you think needs to happen with the H-1B program?
Yeah, look, the H-1B program, unfortunately, there's been quite a bit of fraud historically, and there's been abuse of the program. The program, as it was designed, was to bring really innovative, the best and the brightest, to bring young entrepreneurs and you know, scientists and engineers and people that will drive economic growth. And that is a worthwhile goal. But we've seen it abused. So, for example, a number of years ago, one of the more disturbing stories is Disney brought in a bunch of H-1B workers to do their IT, and then actually made the Americans who were working in the IT department train the H-1B workers that came in, and then they fired all the Americans. I mean, that's ridiculous. That is insane. And it's not the purpose. The H-1B program is ostensibly for jobs that cannot be filled, and it should be in an economic growth mode. And so, listen, I applaud Governor Abbott for responding to the evidence of fraud. The idea, and I have some optimism that the Trump administration is focusing on reforming the H-1B program, and I'm hopeful that they do. One of the ways to do it that they've talked about is awarding the H-1B visas that are awarded to the highest paying jobs, so that you don't have a low-level IT worker. But if you do have some, you know, innovative computer programmer or something that could make a real difference in terms of job creation, there may be a role for H-1Bs if you're limiting it to what the program is sold on is doing. And I think Governor Abbott is responding to very real recent reports of fraud in Texas that I think are highly concerning.
Absolutely. And one of the kind of narrowing in on that is there's a lot of concern about taxpayer funded sponsorships of H-1Bs. So, if you go look at Dallas ISD, they have over 200 sponsored H-1B visa workers, Texas A&M, UT, things of that nature. What is your thoughts on taxpayer-funded H-1B visas?
Look, I think that's a very fair concern to raise. I can't imagine any reason why Dallas ISD should need any H-1Bs. I could imagine research universities as having a need if you have a particularly innovative scientist and there's a real benefit, but that should be limited. This should not just be, filling jobs that should be going to Americans. It should be focused on if you have a really, brilliant physicist, someone who's going to come in and create new inventions that's going to allow new companies to be invented. I could see that making sense in the university setting or a scientific research setting. But for an organization like Dallas ISD, I can't imagine what they would need H-1Bs for.
Now, earlier today, President Trump made some headlines with you by kind of teasing out a possible SCOTUS appointment. What's your immediate reaction to that? Are you going to make a shift if it happens?
I'm not. I'm certainly flattered. It was very, very kind of him, and to be discussed in those circumstances is a high honor. But I will say this is a conversation I've had with President Trump many times. I mean, he and I are close friends, and I've spent a decade as President Trump's strongest ally in the Senate. And in his first term, he and I had serious conversations about the court for all three of the vacancies, for all three of the appointments he made. And I told him no 3 times. And I got to say, a lot of people are surprised when they hear that, because before I was in the Senate, my professional career was litigating in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. And so the court is an institution I revere, and people are like, I have good friends of mine who are like, are you an idiot? Like, what kind of moron says no to that? But I'll tell you why. The reason I've said no is a principled federal judge stays out of policy fights, stays out of political fights. If I were a federal judge, that's what I'd do. I don't want to stay out of policy fights. I don't want to stay out of political fights. I want to be right in the middle of them. And if that's what you want to do, the right place to do it is in the elected branches of government. It's what I'm doing right now. And you look at, we started this by talking about the Trump accounts and school choice. I mean, those are massively consequential policy wins that if I were a judge, that wouldn't be my job. I wouldn't be able to fight for school choice if I were a judge. And so I care deeply about having principled constitutionalists on the Supreme Court and on the federal courts. And I've been part of nominating and confirming hundreds of them. But I don't want me to be one of them. And so my answer, and the president knows this, I've told him this in the Oval Office, my answer on the court is not only no, but hell no.
Now, you talked about wanting to be in the center of policy fights. Are you maybe thinking of different type of elected office down the road?
Well, listen, time will tell. But right now we've got a battle. We've got an historic opportunity, and it's an opportunity that the voters gave us. They gave us at the beginning of the first Trump term, the first 2 years, and they've given us right now. They've given us a Republican in the White House. They've given us a Republican Senate and a Republican House. There's no guarantee that we'll have a Republican House or even a Republican Senate next year. So we have a window to accomplish big policy wins for the American people right now. And so my focus every day, I've got a job representing 31 million Texans. And what a joy to go into work and say, I'm fighting for every Texan. I'm fighting for jobs. My number one priority is jobs, jobs, jobs. And so I'm working every day with the president and with the administration to continue winning big policy victories for Texans. And I'm a big believer that good policy is good politics. And so if we keep winning big victories for the American people, I think that will manifest in election victories in November in the midterms. And I'm hopeful we have a really good midterm. But that is going to be contingent on producing real results. And I think the economy is going to be a huge factor in determining whether the midterms are good or bad.
Absolutely. Well, I believe that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much, Senator, for finding some time in your busy schedule and joining us on the Texas Bullpen.
Absolutely. I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir.